In 1962, the Cold War was at its coldest. The Russians had built the Berlin Wall the previous year. Kennedy, who had been elected because he promised to get tough with the communists, felt that Khrushchev had one-upped him at the Vienna summit in 1961. In April 1962, the Americans put nuclear missiles in Turkey. Also, in 1959, a rebel named Fidel Castro took power in Cuba, an island just 90 miles away from Florida. Before Castro took over, the government, led by Colonel Batista, had been a corrupt and right-wing military dictatorship. But the Americans had many business interests in Cuba. When Castro came to power, however, he nationalized American companies in Cuba. In retaliation, the Americans stopped all aid to Cuba and all imports of Cuban sugar. This was a blow to Castro, as sugar was the mainstay of the Cuban economy. Castro was forced to look to the USSR for help, and in 1960, the USSR signed an agreement to buy 1 million tons of Cuban sugar every year. Castro, who had not been a communist when he took power, became a communist. The United States was very worried by this political action taken by Fidel Castro because during the Cold War, the U.S. maintained a policy of fighting communists anywhere and everywhere it appeared, such as during the Vietnam War. However, there had been no communist governments remotely near the United States homeland till the Cuban Revolution, which ultimately caused many problems for the country involved in the Cuban Missile Crisis. America was alarmed in April 1961. With Kennedy's knowledge, the CIA funded, trained, armed, and transported 1,300 Cuban exiles to invade Cuba. They landed at the Bay of Pigs and made an attempt to overthrow Castro. The invasion was a disaster, and President Kennedy was humiliated. In this image, you can see that based on where the missile silos were placed, the Soviet Union could have bombed most of the United States, including major cities and government sites such as Washington, D.C. and Langley. In September 1961, Castro asked for, and Russia publicly promised, weapons to defend Cuba against America, which is why, on the 14th of October 1962, the Americans discovered the missile sites in Cuba. These sites brought every town in the U.S. within range of Soviet nuclear missiles. President Kennedy called a meeting of the National Security Council and on the 22nd of October went on TV to tell the American people that they were under threat. The main reasons for the start of the Cuban Missile Crisis were the Cuban Revolution, the Bay of Pigs, and Operation Mongoose. Operation Mongoose was an action taken by John F. Kennedy's administration in order to stop the spread of communism so close to the United States. On the 14th of October 1962, an American U-2 spy plane took pictures of a nuclear base being built on Cuba. Kennedy's advisors told him he had 10 days before Cuba could fire the missiles at targets in America. Kennedy then released a statement to Khrushchev and the Soviet Union stating that if they did not turn the Soviet ships around that were carrying the missiles, the United States would be forced to begin an all-out war against the Soviet Union, thus beginning the Cuban Missile Crisis.